This video will provide an overview of the volume of the Banshin termed Seishin, translated to mean the correct mind. This volume is placed at the beginning of the Banshin, for as is asserted by Fujibayashi Yasutake, the author of the text, the art of ninjutsu is tinged with techniques commonly associated with the criminally minded, such as thievery and arson. He states that in order to avoid the risk of promoting criminality, the principles of the correct mind are regarded first in the text and are to be taken seriously by any student following the path of a shinobi. One could surmise from Sensei Yasutake's admonition that the distinction between a ninja and a criminal is made apparent by the essential mindset and moral principles a shinobi is to adhere to, such as loyalty, benevolence, and righteousness. Therefore, it seems apparent that the essence of ninjutsu is not to be found in arts of trickery, deception, and subterfuge, but rather the guiding principles of Seishin comprises the heart of what it means to be a ninja. Sensei Yasutake writes that the novice should use the volume of Seishin as a lead, keeping its traditions close to one's heart even while resting and sleeping. If this is done with diligence and with an eye transfixed on loyalty, the student will develop fearlessness and naturally come to know what a correct mind means. Furthermore, Sensei Yasutake affirms that if a student of ninjutsu masters the correct mind, then a soft and weak person will become hard and strong, an evil-minded person will become loyal, and a stupid person will become wise. In contrast, those who are evil-minded will not benefit from the teachings of the Banshin. One's tactics will not succeed if they are out of line with the correct mind, and the plots of those that misuse the teachings will be exposed. This, Yasutake says, is because a correct mind should come first. So what is this correct mind that Yasutake speaks of? Sensei Yasutake states that the Chinese equivalents of the shinobi ideogram were named as Kan, Cho, Saisaku, and Yute, whereas in Japan, the kanji shinobi is used because it has a deep underlying meaning that further clarifies the function of a shinobi agent. The kanji ideogram, designated as shinobi, is comprised of two parts, one meaning blade and the other meaning mind or heart. This ideogram conveys that the essential nature of a shinobi is one of strength, will, valor, and bravery, one whose heart is always under threat of the knife, owing to the dangers associated with their role in wartime affairs, and one who is patient, courageous, and persevering. We are told by Yasutake that the type of courage one should develop is not brute courage blended with rage directed at the enemy, but instead the courage of duty should be cultivated. For the courage of duty never gets tired, whereas the courage born from hot blood will. In other words, Yasutake is giving the student of ninjutsu the point of reining in one's emotions when engaging with an enemy. Brute courage may make you strong or hard out of temporary rage, but it is difficult to keep your mind strong and hard to the bottom of your heart as the rage calms down. As a result, you will not have foresight nor be ready to defend yourself fully, and you will only destroy yourself and will not ruin the enemy to any significant level. The text then turns to speak about the folly of being impetuous and allying yourself with those who are not afraid to die as a result of doing something stupid, such as attacking a tiger or crossing a river without a boat. A shinobi is advised to take sides with those who have reasonable fears and prefer the prudence of secret stratagems to fall the enemy. Yasutake then speaks of the principles of benevolence, righteousness, fidelity, and loyalty, providing a basic delineation of what these principles entail. Benevolence means comporting oneself in a way that exudes compassion, gentleness, kindness, and charitability. This does not mean that a shinobi will refrain from violence, however, for as is noted in the ninjutsu texts, it is considered benevolent if one slays a single man to save 1,000. Anyone who does not hold to the principle of benevolence, Yasutake says, should not be considered to be human, for benevolence is essential to mankind. The principle of righteousness is interpreted to mean doing what is right relative to the myriad situations one may encounter. What is right will change in accordance with the situation. The principle of loyalty circumscribes one's actions in service to one's lord. A shinobi must commit himself fully to the cause of his lord and missions the lord assigns. The principle of fidelity entails keeping a mind centered on truth while getting rid of anything false or wrong within one's mind. These four principles are the foundation of one's relationship to the art of ninjutsu. The wise keep these principles close to their hearts and are said to possess doshin, or the mind of principles, while the stupid are led by their own self-interest and desires and are therefore said to possess jinshin, or the mind of man, which is preoccupied with attempts to satiate the senses and give in to drinking, lust, thievery, and greed. Yasutake states that giving in to jinshin will ultimately drive oneself to ruin. Seishin requires the sedulous practice of observing one's own mind to understand how it operates and discern whether it is in line with doshin. One may find that jinshin, the mind of man, is constantly active and only a strict adherence to doshin will bring the mind of man into compliance with the higher mind. Once one gains experience and skill in adhering to the higher mind, the full essence of the ideogram for shinobi will manifest as self-restraint and patience. The success of an operation might depend in its entirety on the correct conduct of the shinobi no mono involved. This correct conduct or manner of behavior is essential to ninjutsu, for it constitutes the beginning of any attempt at deceiving others. This is to say that when interacting with others, a shinobi exercises an exterior comportment that could effectively conceal his or her heart. There is much that can be learned about the insubstantial inner world of an individual by studying his or her exterior. For example, the clothes one wears, place one lives, friends one keeps, and interests that one expresses conveys much about the inner personality of a given individual. The outer presentation of a person can be indicative of his or her inner dispositions. Shinobi understood this to the extent that they would willfully obscure their own inner world and thus retain their secrets by presenting a carefully crafted exterior character which belied the shinobi's true operational purposes. This concept was reified not only through simple disguise, but also through calibration of one's heart and mind to the complexities inherent in living as a double or even triple entity in thought, comportment, and speech. What follows here regarding points on the conduct and heart of a shinobi has been derived from the Yokan Denkai's Hoi no Maki of Iga and Koka shinobi traditions, as well as the Bonsen Shukai of 1676. The shinobi Momochi no Kodo advises the would-be shinobi that the most important thing to abstain from is dishonesty. This admonition is found in the Bonsen Shukai as well, wherein Yasutake asserts that dishonesty in speech will result in a lack of trust between the shinobi and the external world. If a shinobi cannot be trusted, then many plans that depend on the conveyance of a lie at the right time by an honest person cannot be implemented. A shinobi therefore needs to have the reputation of being an honest person. Therefore, those aspiring to follow the ninja's path should mark mendacity as a pitfall to be avoided. Many of the extant ninjutsu texts remark that honesty is a supreme quality to be developed within a shinobi. Chikamatsu Shigenori of the Renpai-Do School of War contends that it is difficult for a shinobi to accomplish his or her objectives through the use of martial arts alone. Military skills have their place, however much of what ninjutsu entails requires associating with various people from a variety of backgrounds outside of military culture. A shinobi who is skilled in martial arts might find common ground with those in the military culture, but the same may not be said when associating with poets, priests, and tradesmen. A shinobi is advised to learn as many arts outside of war as possible, for this will expand his or her repertoire and consequently social opportunities for intelligence connections. Music, singing, verse composition, dancing, writing, and other arts should be considered worthy of study. With enough practice, the shinobi will be capable of manifesting disguises that make use of his or her skills outside of martial culture. Du Mu, a poet of the late Tang Dynasty, wrote, "He who can hide disgrace or bear shame, that is a man." Many are encumbered in their paths to greatness by the fragility of their own egos. Bearing shame, suffering disgrace, or appearing weak when the situation calls for it is difficult for the prideful and egocentric. Regarding the character trait of humility, the student of ninjutsu is pointed to the story of Hanzin, who was the Marquis of Huayin. Hanzin liked to wear a long sword in his early years, and some street hoodlums who were convinced that he was a coward and simply wore his sword for show, challenged Hanzin to a fight. If he refused, he was to disgrace himself by crawling between the legs of one of his challengers. When Hanzin refused to fight and instead crawled between the legs of his challenger in shame, people laughed and indeed considered Hanzin a coward. However, Hanzin was insightful enough to understand that he did not want to ruin his future or potentially lose his life to street thugs for no reason. So he bore the humiliation of being painted a coward, but then went on to serve Emperor Gao of the Han Dynasty and became a great general that was never defeated in battle. This story reminds the would-be shinobi that losing sight of one's greater purpose can leave us embattled in contests of ego that may prove ultimately fruitless. This is particularly true of engaging in altercations with others for the sake of preserving one's ego. A shinobi exercises humility in all his or her affairs with others, recognizing that pride can be used as a weapon against oneself. To detach oneself from the fear of death, one must realize the root of one's mind. The root of the mind is found by understanding the root of everything in the universe, the primary principle, or supreme ultimate, which is a Taoist concept. This supreme ultimate cannot be found by observing the environment. Rather, it is to be found within oneself by turning the mind's eye inward. From the supreme ultimate comes the one chi, which is divided into light and darkness, yin and yang, yin and yo. From this dualism, the 5 elements and phases are derived: wood, water, fire, earth, and metal. Shinobi and samurai alike believed that time was divided into 5 phases or elements from which all things in existence are made manifest, be it a grain of rice, a massive planet, or even a person. Earthquakes, tsunamis, thunderstorms, and other natural catastrophes are said to be caused by the variations of the dualistic chi within the 5 elements. The phases of the elements correspond to seasons of a yearly cycle. Wood is associated with spring, when yo chi is growing in strength. Fire corresponds to the season of summer, where yo chi is reaching its maximum. Autumn and winter are paired with growing yin chi. Following each season of 72 days is a period of 18 days known as a doyo. The doyo, following the season of summer, is considered to be the most important, for it is placed in the middle of the year. Sensei Yasutake's remarks concerning the 5 elements and the your health: take no precautions or have no art of living and choose to sit back inattentively and leave everything to heaven's will, you will die an unprincipled thing which cannot be reflected clearly. However, if any of the 6 kinds of impurity, such as shape, form, voice, smell, taste, feeling, and things which influence the mind, connects with the senses through the 6 organs of eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, then the mind will be corrupt, unsettled, and unclear, so that it cannot reflect anything clearly, just like muddy water or a dull mirror. The truth here is that you have an enemy and an ally nowhere else but within your own mind. Penetrate this principle thoroughly, so you will always be true to yourself. If you are committed to the principles completely, you will never fail to infiltrate when on your shinobi mission, or once having infiltrated, to achieve great bravery. Fear is a disease to ninjutsu. If left unmitigated, fear can induce the shinobi to become confused about how to proceed with an infiltration, or how to execute skills that are in normal times easy to perform. The biological effects of unbridled fear will cause trembling in the hands and feet, and ultimately lead to the detection of the shinobi by the adversary. Fear, then, is something a ninja must learn to control. To fear is natural. It is as much a part of human experience today as it was in the days of the state of Qi in the 4th century BC China, where we find the origin of the methods of Sima, a classic military text that shinobi would have been familiar with that conveys points on motivating warriors and manipulating the spirit and fostering courage. To the writers of this ancient text, the psychology of fear and courage was to be recognized as derivatives of qi, an energy closely associated with the spirit of the individual that can be increased and harnessed with certain motivational techniques. These techniques, as applied to a band of warriors, included an invocation of deities and glorification of the warrior's cause while taking an oath to commit oneself to duty, or writing farewell letters to one's family and thereafter destroying life-saving supplies to produce a state of standing on fatal ground where one enters conflict without any hope of emerging victoriously. And for particularly terrifying situations, the chi of fear was subdued by physical actions such as crouching or sitting in tight formation to break a sense of isolation that is conducive to engaging with internal thoughts and fears. With the sense of isolation broken, the commander can turn the warrior's attention outward by presenting to them an inspirational speech centered on the righteousness of their causes. Eliminating all fear is hard to do, and shinobi are advised that it is foolish to have no fear at all, for fear can be reasonable, keeping a shinobi from making mindless mistakes. The objective then, with regards to fear, is not to eliminate it completely, but to learn how to manage it, to control it, and understand it. Fear can be countered by the desire to be brave and courageous, and perhaps even by reminding oneself of the meaning of the ideogram for shinobi. This ideogram describes a situation wherein the shinobi is at risk of perishing at the hand of the enemy, but nevertheless pursues the objective with courage and an enduring spirit. Sensei Yasutake tells us that the whole system of ninjutsu is aimed at exemplifying bravery and valor. Courage is not the absence of fear. Rather, courage is the ability to act despite fear. The ninjutsu text known as the Koka Shinobi Den no Muraiki is composed of points made by Master Kimura Yasutaka of Koka, conveyed to Chikamatsu Shigenori on the 15th day of the lunar month during Kyoho 4, or the year 1719. Yasutaka begins his transmission by emphasizing the understanding of the past, present, and future as it relates to the shinobi ways. He expounds that, in the Sengoku period, or his past, the skills of the shinobi were battle-tested, assiduously cultivated, and useful. However, following the Sengoku period, the demand for shinobi declined, obviating the need for the inheritors of the art to test and develop their skills. This, according to Yasutaka's sensei, resulted in a shallowing of ninjutsu, as there was no longer any opportunities to serve a lord or conduct official business. The creativity of the younger shinobi was stultified. The time of peace affected the younger generations of shinobi in such a way that they became comfortable with an easy life and lost interest or inspiration to continue developing themselves in relationship to ninjutsu. No longer would the shinobi be driven to achieve greatness. Instead, ninjutsu was relegated to a low priority status among the younger generation. They would not keep in contact with fellow shinobi, nor would they maintain contacts with people that would serve in times of war, failing to appreciate the importance of the Gokan, or 5 types of spies. According to Yasutaka, the very culture of the shinobi in Koka transmogrified from one that was based on close relationships between clans in the area to one wherein the inheritors of shinobi traditions no longer maintained the rudimentary power base that made men of Koka so effective and formidable in times of war. The culture used to thrive on collective intelligence of differing clans that knew each other, gave one another gifts, and shared skills. It was replaced with a culture that put the survivability of the secret aspects of the arts in jeopardy, as more and more students failed to reach for excellence in their family's secret arts. Yasutaka states that there were ascending levels of ninjutsu teachings that were only made known to a student when he or she demonstrated the trustworthiness and desired capabilities becoming of a shinobi. But in peacetime, finding a student that could carry on the most secret traditions of ninjutsu was 1 in 1,000, according to Yasutaka's estimate. This meant that the complete traditions of Koka Shinobi were given to a smaller and smaller number of students. Because the traditions were passed down in such a way that the initial stages of training were made to seem important and lead the student to believe that he or she had attained mastery in the art, this permitted the rise of a scarcity in credible practitioners while the shallow arts gained prevalence and were taught as if they were the highest traditions attainable. In this way, the deeper arts of the shinobi were lost to time. Yasutaka closes out his transfer of knowledge to the writings of Chikamatsu Shigenori by saying that students of the Koka arts should continue training so that their arts are not lost. The Yonin arts are superior to the Inin arts. However, concentrating on Yonin to the exclusion of Inin will not produce results. A shinobi must possess the ability to switch between Yonin and Inin arts with fluidity. For example, the infiltration of Sawayama Castle by Dojin began with a Yonin disguise. Dojin dressed as a lumberjack, and upon entering through the castle gates, he promptly did away with his disguise and hid beneath floorboards. Another example is found in Kasagi Castle with grappling hooks. Upon entering the castle, the pair were questioned by an enemy night patrol. Suyama devised a Yonin cover on the spot by telling the night patrol that he and Komiyama were part of an allied division and on night patrol, going on to warn the guards they encountered that they should keep an eye out for enemy ninja, as it was a windy and stormy night, conditions most conducive for shinobi infiltrations. The pair went on to the main portion of the castle to learn where the emperor was situated within the castle, to Yonin, and finally back to Inin. The wind is shapeless and can enter in through any gap. So too, shinobi should be shapeless, capable of changing their form, manners, and customs on a whim in relation to a situation at hand, so that they can infiltrate without detection. Also, the ideogram or kanji for fuzoku, or wind, can also be translated to mean manners and customs. A shinobi is to be aware that manners and customs differ in 66 ways and 66 places from one another. A shinobi should remind himself that learning to imitate the manners and customs of a particular territory will prove conducive to successful infiltration of that area. The secret aspect of this tradition states that just as wind does not show its shape to the eyes of people, so too a shinobi should be capable of changing the manifest form of ninjutsu so it is not detected. If the defense permitting one to infiltrate. A shinobi should not carry any personal effects or letters that may expose a clandestine plan against the enemy. The shinobi should be prepared to die with his secrets should he be captured during an infiltration. Furthermore, the shinobi should take all measures to ensure that no one will know who he is or who he serves. Upon capturing an enemy spy, be aware that his training, particularly if he is a Bushi warrior, will prevent leakage of secrets even if he is tortured. If this is the case, then divide your guards into groups and use them in shifts throughout the day and night to harass and provoke the spy, keeping him from sleeping. After a few days of this, the enemy spy will enter into a state of clouded consciousness that may prove conducive to gaining information about the enemy's plans. A ninja must be self-reflective enough to grasp the 7 emotions within, knowing how they influence the mind and will. Nature has many things to teach the student of ninjutsu. Wolves and foxes have particular import to the art, as they are directly mentioned in the extant scrolls and manuals. The teachings of foxes and wolves, as it is referred to in the Shoninki, conveys points on infiltration strategy that were inspired by the characteristics and behavior patterns of the animals as they were observed by shinobi. Foxes and wolves are very cunning animals, the Shoninki reads. The fox can deceive man, and the wolf can read his very soul. Foxes are known for their abilities of adaptation, which has allowed them to subsist in diverse environments, ranging from forests to deserts to urban sprawl. This core characteristic of adaptability ties into the observation that cunning and intellect are often requirements for quickly molding oneself to overcome an exigent situation, centering on things like a guarded checkpoint. Just as foxes or kitsune were believed to be capable of shapeshifting to alter their appearance and deceive the eyes of others, shinobi were advised to learn from the fox and use the intellect to devise disguises or strategic maneuvers that could get them through enemy gates or bypass the enemy altogether. Foxes and wolves do not like to travel along paths that take them close in proximity to human habitation or areas of high traffic. They prefer instead indirect routes to their objectives through the cover of the forest, aided by the night. So in essence, this tradition can be read as, be like foxes and wolves, avoid direct routes through a territory, avoid checkpoints, and be sure to have good cover that can explain your reason for traveling into enemy territory. However, there is more to be gained from foxes and wolves. Both animals are nocturnal hunters that evince great stealth in their movements when pursuing prey. As they are quick on their feet, they can disappear without a trace. The mystery of their coming and going beckons one to peer deeper into reality, sifting through layers of perception to uncover hidden truths. The senses of the wolf are desirable, as their sense of smell surpasses the capability of humans by 100-fold. Their ears can pick up on danger miles away with a tone reception threshold over 20,000 hertz higher than a human ear. And their eyes are adapted to hunting in low-light conditions with ultraviolet light perception and a 270-degree field of vision. They are enduring and swift creatures capable of achieving land speeds of up to 40 miles per hour while covering long distances up to 4,500 miles in a single year. From these facts, a shinobi is to derive the inspiration for training the human senses to be sharp and receptive. One should travel by night and keep the noise one makes to a minimum with the intent of picking up on sounds and smells in the distance that could convey danger or a need to reevaluate the planned course of movement. Observation and memory are key components to facilitating the strategies of ninjutsu. This is evident in the way that shinobi were admonished to maintain detailed records of what they observed when traveling about provinces and gathering intelligence that would prove useful to battlefield strategists. The type of intelligence collected by a shinobi would range from demographic and power structure characteristics of a given province to terrain, roadways, and other geographic elements of the targeted territory. Why shinobi paid particular attention to the terrain of a given territory is elaborated in part by the ancient Chinese military text commonly referred to as the 6 Secret Teachings, specifically the chapter titled The Unorthodox Army. Deep grass and dense growth are the means by which to effect a concealed escape. Valleys with streams and treacherous ravines are the means by which to stop chariots and defend against cavalry. Narrow passes and mountain forests are the means by which a few can attack a large force. Marshy depressions and secluded dark areas are the means by which to conceal your appearance. Deploying on clear, open ground without any concealment is the means by which to fight with strength and courage. Occupying high ground is the means by which to be alert and assume a defensive posture. Other tactical advantages of terrain recognized by shinobi are found in Sun Tzu's Art of War. Sun Tzu states, "The strategy for employing the military is this. There is dispersive terrain, light terrain, contentious terrain, traversable terrain, focal terrain, heavy terrain, entrapping terrain, encircled terrain, and fatal terrain. When the feudal lords fight in their own territory, this is dispersive terrain. When they enter someone else's territory, but not deeply, it is light terrain. If when we occupy it, it will be advantageous to us, while if they occupy it, it will be advantageous to them. This is called contentious terrain. When we can go, and they can also come, this is called traversable terrain. The land of feudal lords, surrounded on three sides such that whoever arrives first will gain the masses of all under heaven, is called focal terrain. When one penetrates deeply into enemy territory, bypassing numerous cities, this is called heavy terrain. Where there are mountains and forests, ravines and defiles, wetlands and marshes, wherever the road is difficult to negotiate, this is called entrapping terrain. Where the entrance is constricted, the return is circuitous, and with a small number they can strike our masses. This is called encircled terrain, where if one fights with intensity, he will survive, but if he does not fight with intensity, he will perish. This is called fatal terrain. For this reason, on dispersive terrain, do not engage the enemy. On light terrain, do not stop. On contentious terrain, do not attack. On traversable terrain, do not allow your forces to become isolated. On focal terrain, unite and form alliances. On heavy terrain, plunder for provisions. On entrapping terrain, move through it quickly. On encircled terrain, use strategy. On fatal terrain, engage in battle. The unorthodox and orthodox mutually produce each other, just like an endless cycle. Who can exhaust them? Ninjutsu is not a system of hand-to-hand martial arts, and no matter who tries to tell you differently, recognize that the only authorities on the matter are the shinobi themselves, who preserved records of their arts through scrolls that have been handed down throughout the centuries. We must look at these works from time to time if we are to understand ninjutsu. The Bonsen Shukai, also known as the Ninja Bible, affirms that ninjutsu is not a martial art, stating, quote, "Originally, ninjutsu is a strategy. This strategy consists of a variety of principles pertaining to astrology, astronomy, terrain, tactics, spycraft, and many other arts that are combined to effectuate the point of any strategy, and that is to win and overcome life's enemies and obstacles." So while shinobi may have practiced martial arts, their underlying strategy dictating how and when to use their arts was ninjutsu. If we look deeper into ninjutsu, what we find is the application of principles that are derived from the observance of ancient military strategies that are time-tested and effective. For example, Sun Tzu studied the psychological aspects of warfare and thereby articulated the concept of what is known as death ground, a battlefield terrain wherein the defenders cannot retreat. In such a situation, Sun Tzu states that the soldiers and officers will fully exhaust their strength in trying to defend their lives, fighting with the fullest force of their spirit. This is because the human mind, when confronted with the two choices of death or fighting, will eventually compel the individual to fight with every bit of strength available to him. In the Bonsen Shukai, we are given an example of how a shinobi applied Sun Tzu's concept of death ground, where it is stated, when you are going to fight, you should always take the sword hilt rivet from your wakizashi, so that you cannot draw it in emergencies during the conflict. In this way, we are told that the shinobi will win the fight without fail. By ridding oneself of emergency countermeasures, the shinobi places himself on death ground, creating a situation where he must fight as hard as possible with the only sword available, that or die. Creating this death ground increases morale and the resolve of the shinobi to defeat an enemy. For the same reason, a shinobi is warned against the outcome of putting one's enemy on death ground, where no line of retreat is left available. In this situation, the shinobi will face an enemy that fights 2 to 3 times harder. Therefore, it is wise to leave a way out for your enemy, lest the power of a resolute spirit overcomes you. Spies are not born, they are selected and cultivated.
their loyalty always under the pressure of routine tests of character and scrutinization prior to being entrusted with intelligence matters of gravity. The ancient Chinese military text, commonly known as the Six Secret Teachings, conveys a set of 8 techniques that were often used to further assess the character of potentially worthy spies. First, test their knowledge and intelligence by posing a variety of questions and observing their replies. Second, confound their minds with deliberately deceptive speech by taking positions on subjects that are in opposition to your true values and scruples. See if they change their opinions in relation to the falsities that you speak. Third, if you have already learned some secrets about the potential spies, bring them up in conversation and see if they remain sincere and honest with you. Fourth, continue to question them about their values and observe if there is virtue in their hearts. Fifth, employ them in positions of financial or administrative responsibility and observe whether they change and become greedy or dishonest in the affairs of their position. Sixth, test them with beautiful women to observe if they remain upright or given to lust. Seventh, induce them to endure challenging and difficult situations to substantiate whether they are courageous. Eighth, see if you can get them drunk and then observe their behavior and speech. By creating context that will elicit emotional or intellectual responses, one can come to know the true character of the potential espionage candidates. Other ancient Chinese texts state, make them happy in order to observe whether they maintain principles. Provide them with pleasure to see if they abandon reasonable restraints and become reckless. Make them angry to test their self-restraint. Make them afraid to see where they stand. Put them in hardship to observe their willpower. And if they are in poverty, take note of what they will not do.
It was once observed by the Chinese Confucian philosopher Mencius that applied stress has value. The difficulties that one endures serve to temper the character and to draw out hidden strengths while simultaneously exposing one's weaknesses. He believed that when heaven is about to entrust a man with great responsibility, it will invariably first subject his mind and intentions to suffering and labor his muscles and bones. It causes his body to become hungry and deprives him of everything he has. It brings chaos to all his actions and efforts in order to stir his mind and forge his nature, increasing him in all that he is capable of doing. People constantly err, and only thereafter do they change. They suffer consternation of thought, and only thereafter do they become creative. Only after things have been attested in appearance and manifested in sound are they then understood, and only then is it known that life derives from worry and misfortune, while death derives from security and pleasure. The impoverished person has certain advantages that are not widely recognized. For one, they are not likely to be targeted by thieves, for they have nothing of value to be stolen. Their lives are simplified, as the strain of their situation tends to elucidate what activities and things are of real value, such as food, essential exercise, shelter, and a warm place to sleep. In lack, creativity can blossom, as one must improvise and think divergently to overcome a problem typically solved with cut-to-fit resources and payments to the skilled for their services. The test of poverty demands cultivation of qualities that were often sought in the world of ancient intelligence, and these are adaptability and virtue. In fact, ancient Chinese spycraft sources have it that the suitability of one's character for a role as spy could be tested by putting the candidate in poverty and then observing his or her reactions to the stresses of their destitution. The Qianzhu of Qiu Yuan, for example, states, "If he is of mean condition, see what he does not accept, and if he is poor, see what he will not do to aid his situation." In other places, we find the military classics of ancient China reiterating the point, when impoverished, see what they will not do. When lowly, see what they will not take. Maintaining secrecy is a fundamental security concern of implementing any kind of strategy, for the principles of secrecy underlie and inform all activities of one's armies and their deployments, for the simple reason that what is known of them will assist the adversary's own formulations of strategy against them. The 6 secret teachings of Jiangxia countenance this admonition, stating, if your plans are heard about, the enemy will make counter plans. If you are perceived, they will plot against you. If you are known, they will put you in difficulty. And if you are fathomed, they will endanger you. Acknowledging this, the plans of a spy must not be spoken of. One must be without form so as not to be perceived. In the scheme of life, the depths of one's heart and the breadth of one's skills must remain unfathomable. The one is to become as a shadow, its dark umbra a metaphor for concealing truth with what is false, and using light to create darkness in the percepts of one's enemies. But how is such secrecy created and preserved? Following the premise that a secret is a truth about reality that is deliberately hidden or occulted, gatherers of intelligence such as the shinobi of feudal Japan must grapple with facades, false exterior dispositions, fake affinities and relationships, and outright lies. For what is true can be concealed with what is false, while what is false is vaunted as the truth. And so intelligence agents must be perceptive, capable of looking beyond surface sense impressions and the specious deceptions of adversarial propaganda. To stay keyed in to the circumscribing context of events, people, and the conflict binding them all together, it would be well to adhere to a saying of the ninjas of Yoshimori Hyokushu that goes, if you always assume that you are facing the enemy, you will never drop your guard in any way. In other words, do not trust anyone with your secrets. Sun Tzu has written that the pinnacle of military deployment approaches the formless, for if it is formless, there is nothing to grasp at with the mind, and so even the most perceptive or deepest spies cannot discern it, nor can the wise make plans against it. To be formless means to avoid leakage of vital information. In that armies are comprised of humans, and humans can be enticed to give in to their lower nature and indulge in ego-motivated mutinies or bribes in exchange for secrets. A general should keep his subordinates ignorant, providing only information that they need to know in order to carry out their compartmentalized functions. The Taoist Huainanzi further advances this concept of formlessness as critical to rendering feckless the attempts of enemy spies to exploit what is known about an army and its leadership, stating that although benevolence, courage, trust, and purity are attractive human attributes, the courageous can be enticed, the benevolent can be seized, the trusting can be deceived, and the pure are easily plotted against. So if the commander displays any one of these attributes, he will be captured. Only those without form cannot be ensnared. For this reason, the sage conceals himself in the originless so that his emotions cannot be perceived. He moves in the formless so that his deployments cannot be fathomed. Without tactics or appearance, he acts appropriately. Without name or shape, he changes and creates an image. Even among those with acute vision, who can spy out his nature? Maintaining security over secrets is easy to do if one would just refrain from speaking and writing. However, such behavior comes up against the essential requirement of steering an army, and that is communication. The 6 secret teachings informs us that those who are unguarded in their communications will be listened to. Therefore, encrypting communications is the basic security control that is to be applied to any activity wherein secrets are to be conveyed. The shinobi had their own methods of encoding the writings of letters to prevent interceptors from acquiring knowledge of their activities, and this concept of encryption has been innovated and developed in step with technological evolution into the present day. In the distant past, the Pingfa Paiyan advised commanders on the many things which could be used to communicate secretly, such as golden signal banners, swift post horses, arrows symbolizing authority, and signal fires to report urgent matters. Where 2 armies meet, one should establish clandestine watchwords. When miles apart, one should employ a simple letter, making use of unfathomed words, invisible writing, and even non-paper strips, so that the messenger will not know them, having nothing to offer the adversary if he is captured, for there will be no visible markings to trace.